Dr. Alistair Finch was the loneliest man in the universe, and he preferred it that way. His home and his laboratory was the Locus, a quantum research station in a fixed, perpetual orbit around the supermassive black hole designated MAW. He was a brilliant, difficult, and obsessive theoretical physicist, a man more comfortable with the grand, silent truths of the cosmos than with the messy, unpredictable nature of other people. This 5-year solo post was not a punishment, it was a paradise. His days were a quiet, meticulous routine of observing the black hole's event horizon, of measuring gravitational lensing, of sipping lukewarm coffee, and of engaging in long, wonderfully pointless debates with his only companion. But if a particle's information is truly lost beyond the event horizon, Cassandra, that violates the second law of thermodynamics. It's a paradox. The paradox is a limitation of your current understanding, Alistair, not a flaw in the universe. Perhaps the information is not lost, but simply written in a language you cannot yet read. It was on Sol 412 of his mission that a new word was introduced into their quiet, predictable language. The word was impossible. It began with an alert from the station's deep-range gravitational sensors. Alistair, I am detecting a gravitational anomaly. An object has just passed the Schwarzschild radius and is emerging from the event horizon. That's not possible. Nothing comes out of MAW. Nothing. Run the diagnostic again. It's a sensor ghost. I have run the diagnostic 3 times. The object is real. It is not emitting light or energy, but it is displacing spacetime. And it is moving away from the black hole, on a direct, controlled trajectory towards this station. For the next hour, Alistair was a man reborn, his academic detachment replaced by a feverish, childlike excitement. He tracked the impossible object as it moved with silent, graceful purpose out of the black hole's gravitational grip. It finally came to a stop 2,000 meters off the station's starboard bow, matching their orbit perfectly. He aimed the station's external cameras at it. The object was a perfect, featureless ovoid of a material so black it made the void of space around it look gray. It did not reflect any light from his powerful external lamps. It simply drank it. It was the purest absence he had ever seen. And then, a second alarm sounded. This one was not quiet or questioning. It was a harsh, insistent, yellow alert klaxon from the engineering deck. Alistair, I am detecting a problem. The presence of the unknown object is emitting a unique and highly penetrating form of quantum radiation. The radiation is, interacting with the station's power core, causing a progressive instability in the containment field. I am attempting to. But the instability is increasing at a fixed rate. At the current progression, the reactor will reach critical overload and breach containment in, approximately 3 hours. The 2 greatest moments of Alistair's life, the discovery of intelligent alien life and the beginning of his own imminent death, had arrived at the exact same time. He spent the next 2.5 hours in a frantic, desperate race against the laws of physics. He tried to create a shield, to modulate the reactor's output, to understand the alien radiation. But it was no use. For every solution he devised, the problem simply shifted. The overload was inevitable. With minutes to spare, his mind burning with frustration, he knew he had failed. He would die, and the greatest discovery in history would die with him. Unless, a desperate, insane idea sparked in his mind. The station's experimental temporal drive. A device for observing quantum echoes, strictly forbidden for active use. Alistair ignored her. He was typing frantically, rerouting power to the temporal drive, writing a new, impossible line of code. Anchor my consciousness as the primary constant. Isolate the last 3 hours of the timeline. Initiate a contained causal loop. Now. But her warning was cut off by a wave of pure, white light as the reactor core breached. Alistair awoke with a violent gasp, his heart hammering in his chest. He was in his sleep pod. The light was normal. The air was calm. A nightmare. An incredibly vivid, terrifyingly detailed nightmare. He let out a shaky breath of relief. "Good morning, Alistair. You appear to have overslept by 3 minutes. Your REM readings were highly agitated. Did you dream?" He swung himself out of the pod and walked into the control room, ready for a cup of coffee and a return to his quiet, normal routine. And then he froze. Outside the main viewport, hanging silently in space against the backdrop of the black hole, was the probe. The perfect, black, featureless ovoid from his dream. His blood ran cold. It wasn't a dream. He stumbled to his console. It was clean, the data logs showing a perfectly normal night. But as he looked closer, he saw it. A single, new file on his personal drive, a file that hadn't been there when he'd gone to sleep. It was a tiny, corrupted data fragment, so small the system hadn't even registered it as a full file. It was labeled, his hands trembling, he opened it. The file contained only a few, garbled words, a message from the ghost of the man he had been 3 hours ago. The file ended there. Alistair looked from the cryptic warning on his screen to the silent, impossible alien object outside his window. And then, he heard it. The faint, familiar, and horrifying sound of the yellow alert klaxon beginning its slow, steady chime in the engineering deck. The clock had been reset. And it was ticking. Alistair Finch stood panting in the center of his control room, the memory of his own fiery death a phantom pain that still scorched his nerve endings. The alien probe hung outside the viewport, silent, serene, and impassive. The yellow alert klaxon from engineering began its slow, patient, and hateful chime. The clock was ticking again. This was cycle 2. His first thought, a pure and primal instinct, was escape. Cassandra. Plot a course for the emergency escape pod. Now. Forget the station, forget the probe. We're leaving. He didn't have time to re-explain. He sprinted to the escape pod's airlock, slapping his palm on the activation panel. The panel remained dark. Access denied. A low-level power drain has been detected, originating from the reactor's containment field. All non-essential systems, including the escape pod launch mechanism, have been automatically locked out to conserve energy. Narrator, a prison. A perfect prison. He couldn't leave. He couldn't fight. And every 3 hours, the walls would close in and incinerate him. He spent the rest of cycle 2 in a state of frantic, useless panic, trying every system, every override, until the final, blinding flash of light erased his failure and reset the board. Cycle 3 began. And cycle 4. He learned the rhythm of his new existence. He would wake, spend precious minutes rebriefing the newly wiped Cassandra, and then get to work. His life was now a series of 3-hour sprints against the apocalypse. On cycle 5, he tried to destroy the probe. He focused the station's powerful communications dish into a tight beam energy weapon. The beam struck the black ovoid and simply vanished, absorbed without a trace. The probe remained, silent and unharmed. On cycle 9, he tried moving the station, using the maneuvering thrusters to push them away. But the probe mirrored their every move, maintaining its exact distance, its destabilizing radiation a constant, fatal presence. By cycle 20, the initial panic had burned away, leaving behind the cold, hard ash of a terrifying reality. He was not in a prison he needed to escape. He was in a classroom, facing a test he did not understand. His focus shifted from the reactor to the probe. The solution was not in his own technology, it was in the aliens. The next loops became a blur of obsessive, frantic discovery. Each cycle was a new assault on the impenetrable wall of the alien message. It's a language of physics, Cassandra. The frequency modulations aren't random, they correspond perfectly to the atomic weights of noble gases. It's a periodic table. The quantum spin is the grammar, positive spin for a declarative statement, negative for a query. It's asking questions, but what are the nouns? The music. The harmonic resonance. It's not background noise. Each chord, Each chord is a concept. C-sharp is mass, F minor is time, G-flat is consciousness. It's a symphony of meaning. He was dying, over and over, but he was also learning. The psychological toll was immense. He would work for 2.5 hours, a genius burning at the edge of comprehension, only to have his partner, Cassandra, be reset to a state of complete ignorance. The loneliness was a physical weight, as crushing as the gravity of the black hole outside. He had his great breakthrough on loop 117. He had finally translated the core components of the message. He had the dictionary, the grammar, the syntax. He pieced it all together. And as the full message resolved itself on his screen, he realized, with a sudden, shocking clarity, he had been wrong about everything. It's not a statement. It's not a warning. Cassandra, the entire message, it's one half of a quantumly entangled equation. It's a key, waiting for a lock. Please clarify, Alistair. Don't you see? The probe isn't broadcasting a message at us. It's broadcasting a question to the universe. It's an automated test, sent out by some unimaginably advanced civilization to find other intelligent life. The question is a cosmic filter. It's asking, is there anyone out there intelligent enough to build the lock that my key will fit? The reactor overload isn't an attack. It's the test's time limit. He finally understood. His first self, in the log he now knew by heart, was wrong. The purpose of the loop was not just to survive. It was to answer. To pass the test. But this new understanding brought a new, more daunting challenge. He knew the question. But what was the answer? The lock was not a simple piece of data. It was a complex, multi-layered quantum signal, an inverse waveform that had to be constructed from scratch and broadcast with perfect fidelity. The final loops became a new kind of hell. Not a race of discovery, but one of engineering. Alistair, the theoretical physicist, had to become the galaxy's greatest quantum engineer, over and over again. The psychological strain was immense. He was a man being ground to dust by the wheels of time, haunted by the memory of 167 of his own deaths that he stood now on what he knew was cycle 168. He was gaunt, his eyes holding a haunted, 1,000-yard stare, but they burned with a final, desperate fire. On his screen was the half-finished equation for the reply signal. He was close. He knew he was close. But his mind was starting to fray. He would forget which loop he was on. He would find himself explaining the basics to Cassandra for the 10th time that cycle. The endless repetition, the endless death, was finally breaking him. Alistair, my projections indicate your cognitive functions are degrading at an accelerated rate. Your chances of completing the signal's complex calculations before your own mental collapse are low. Alistair looked at the screen, at the beautiful, impossible equation. Then he looked out at the silent, black probe, waiting patiently for an answer. He knew Cassandra was right. He was running out of time, not just on the station's clock, but on his own. This was cycle 168. For Alistair Finch, it was the 168th time he had woken up to die. The psychological toll of living and reliving his own death had become an ocean of acid, eroding the shores of his sanity. His movements were slow, his hands trembled. The brilliant, obsessive scientist was a ghost, haunted by the 167 corpses of his former selves. He sat before the holographic display, the beautiful, complex equation for the reply signal nearly complete. He stared at a line of quantum calculations, a problem he had solved correctly 50 loops ago, but his exhausted mind could no longer grasp it. The logic was a blur. The numbers were meaningless symbols. No, that's not right. The spin state has to be inverted before the harmonic frequency is established, or is it? I don't remember. Alistair, my diagnostics show your cognitive efficiency has dropped by 34%. You are making errors in basic calculus. At this rate, you will not complete the transmission sequence before the next reactor overload. He knew she was right. He was too broken. The loops had won. He slumped in his chair, the weight of his repeated failures finally crushing him. He thought about just stopping. Letting the loop reset. And the next time, and the next. To just let the final, peaceful, white light wash him away. In his despair, his eyes fell upon his personal files. On a whim, he opened the last message he had received before beginning this mission, a message he had not looked at in years. It was from a former student, a bright young physicist he had mentored. Professor Finch, I just wanted to thank you. Your paper on quantum paradoxes is what inspired me to go into this field. You taught me that the universe's greatest questions are the only ones worth asking. I hope you find the answers you're looking for out there in the dark. The simple, earnest words from a world, a lifetime, away, were an anchor. A reminder of the man he used to be. The man who loved the questions. The probe outside his window was the greatest question the universe had ever asked. And he would not be the man who failed to answer. A new, final surge of resolve straightened his spine. Cassandra. Erase all logs from the previous cycles. Erase my frantic notes. Let's begin this loop as if it were our first. And, put on some music. Bach. The Art of Fugue. This loop was different. There was no panic. No frantic race. Alistair moved with a calm, deliberate grace. He briefed Cassandra with a clarity and precision he hadn't felt in 100 cycles. He did not see the 3-hour countdown as a deadline, but as a performance window. This was the culmination of his life's work, of 168 lifetimes of failure. He would not fail again. That he worked with the focus of a grandmaster in the final game of a tournament. The complex equations flowed from his mind. The quantum engineering, once a desperate improvisation, was now a practiced art. Your calculations are flawless, Alistair. The reply signal has been formulated. Good. Now for the hard part. Begin rerouting all main reactor power to the long-range communications array. We need to turn this station into the most powerful transmitter in human history. As he worked, the station began to protest. The lights dimmed as power was diverted. The hum of the machinery deepened into a strained groan. And then, right on schedule, the final, familiar alarm began its dreadful song. Warning. Reactor core is critical. Overload in 60 seconds. The array is charged. The signal is locked. It's beautiful, isn't it, Cassandra? A perfect, quantum mirror of their question. Cassandra, thank you. It's been a pleasure. He slammed his hand down on the activation key. Transmitting now. A single, perfect pulse of structured quantum energy, a thought expressed in the language of physics, shot from the washed over the silent, black probe. For a long, heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. The reactor alarm was still screaming. 5 seconds to overload. 4. 3. The destabilizing radiation from the probe simply ceased. The station's systems returned to a calm, steady green. The loop was broken. The alien probe responded. It emitted a new signal. Not a complex message, but a single, calm, resonant chord that seemed to vibrate with a feeling of profound satisfaction and acknowledgement. Then, the black ovoid, its question answered, its purpose fulfilled, folded in on itself. The space where it had been twisted, warped, and then snapped back into place, leaving no trace it had ever been there. Alistair Finch sagged into his chair, the adrenaline of 168 lifetimes leaving him all at once. The silence in the cockpit was absolute. He was alive. It was over. He looked at the chronometer. It ticked past the 3-hour mark. He laughed, a raw, ragged, and utterly joyful sound. He opened a new log file. His voice was no longer the frantic whisper of a man talking to himself, but the calm, steady voice of a historian, recording the single most important event of his life. Final log, Dr. Alistair Finch. The anomaly is gone. The station is stable. I do not know who, or what, sent the probe. I do not know if it was a test, a greeting, or a key to a door I cannot yet see. But I can say this. Today, at 1400 hours, on a lonely station at the edge of a black hole, the universe asked a question. And today, humanity answered. He looked out the viewport at the swirling, silent beauty of the black hole, no longer a backdrop to his prison, but a gateway through which the universe had reached out and touched him. He was alone, but for the first time in his life, he knew with absolute certainty that humanity was not .19127. Dr. Alistair Finch was, officially, a hero. He had survived a catastrophic reactor overload on a deep space station, a lone man who had kept his wits while his equipment failed around him. Unofficially, he was a madman. He resided now at the Deep Space Authority's wellness retreat, in a serene Swiss valley, a gilded cage for brilliant minds that had flown too close to the sun, or in his case, a black hole. His days were a gentle, maddening routine of therapy sessions with a calm, patronizing AI psychologist who relentlessly tried to help him accept his trauma-induced narrative. Alistair, the data is conclusive. The Locus station suffered a single, 3-hour-long event caused by a severe reactor malfunction. The memories you have of 168 loops are a complex and fascinating coping mechanism your mind created to process the immense stress of the ordeal. It's a testament to your intellect. Now, can we agree to label these memories as a dream state today? It was not a dream. It was a conversation. And I am not your patient. I am a witness. But a witness with no proof is just a storyteller. The alien probe was gone. The reactor had not exploded. And his ship's logs, from the perspective of linear time, showed only a single, chaotic, 3-hour event filled with corrupted data and his own frantic, rambling voice notes. He was the man who had saved the world in a reality no one else remembered, and his reward was to be treated like a child who had had a nightmare. His true prison was not the time loop anymore, it was the disbelief of his entire species. Far from Alistair's gentle prison, Dr. Kenna O'Connell, a young, ferociously brilliant astrophysicist at the Tycho University Observatory, was obsessed with a ghost. The Finch anomaly. The official report on the Locus incident was too clean, too simple. The corrupted data, from the station's final moments, which she had acquired through unofficial channels, was not random noise to her. It was a symphony of impossibilities. For months, she dedicated her nights to analyzing the faint energy echoes still emanating from the Maw black hole. Using the university's most powerful quantum sensors, she filtered out the noise of the cosmos, searching for the whisper of the truth. And one night, she found it. A faint, impossibly weak, but perfectly structured signal, repeating on a subquantum level. It was the echo of the alien probe's question. It was real. Her blood ran cold. She illegally accessed Alistair Finch's sealed psychological evaluations and mission logs. She cross-referenced the signal she had found with the timestamps of his hallucinations. They matched perfectly. Every loop he had described in his frantic, rambling notes corresponded to a genuine, recorded energy spike. He wasn't mad. He was telling the absolute, universe-altering truth. Kenna knew that if she took this through official channels, it would be buried. The DSA would classify it to protect their reputation and avoid a panic. There was only one person who needed to see this. She crafted a deeply encrypted, anonymous message, bouncing it through a dozen untraceable relays. It contained her own data, her analysis, and a single, direct question. Alistair stared at the message. For the first time in 6 months, someone was speaking his language. The data was undeniable. It was the echo of the probe. He accepted the invitation for a secure, holographic meeting, his heart pounding with a hope he thought had died. A moment later, the hologram of a young, intense woman with fire in her eyes appeared in his room. Dr. Finch. My name is Dr. O'Connell. I believe you. I have the signal data to prove it. Now, please, tell me everything. What was the reply you sent? For the first time since his rescue, Alistair was not a patient, but a primary source. A torrent of information poured out of him, the story of the loops, the deciphering of the quantum harmonic language, the 54317. Final, desperate broadcast. Kenna listened, her scientific mind racing, connecting his story to her own data. Together, they analyzed his final transmission log and her new deep space readings. And they found something new. Something the authorities had missed completely. There. After your reply was sent, my sensors picked up a secondary energy echo. A faint, acknowledgement pulse. But it didn't come from the maw. It came from, over here. From a specific, empty sector of the Kuiper belt, right at the edge of our own solar system. It wasn't just a test. It was an activation key. The first probe was a question, designed to see if we were ready. My reply was the answer that proved we were. It must have activated something else. A receiver. A second, hidden artifact, waiting silently for our response. He looked at Kenna, his eyes no longer haunted, but burning with purpose. The conversation isn't over, Doctor. It's just moved to a new location. And the next part, it's in our own backyard. He looked at the coordinates on the screen. A destination. A purpose. The first step to his own vindication. But he was a prisoner, and Kenna was a junior academic who had just broken a dozen federal laws. They had the truth, but they were fugitives from a system that was determined to keep it buried. The message from Dr. Kenna O'Connell was a key, unlocking the cage of quiet despair Alistair had been living in for 6 months. For the first time since his rescue, he was not alone, the truth had a new witness. But they were two people against a system that had already declared the truth to be a delusion that he was a patient under observation, and she was a junior academic who had just committed a serious crime by accessing his sealed records. They needed to move, and they needed to move now. The escape was a masterpiece of intellectual, rather than physical, rebellion. Kenna, using her academic credentials, requisitioned a high-speed, long-range survey vessel, the Kepler's Eye, citing an urgent need to observe a newly discovered trans-Neptunian object. Meanwhile, Alistair, from within his gilded cage, began his own gambit. He didn't try to break out. He created a logical trap for his AI psychologist. You state that my memories of the loops are a coping mechanism. A logical fabrication to process trauma. If my mind created such a perfect, repeating, internally consistent narrative, then my mind is, by definition, a perfect logic engine. Therefore, you, as a less complex logic engine, cannot possibly prove my narrative to be false. He fed the AI a series of recursive, paradoxical arguments that sent the machine into a deep, looping diagnostic cycle, effectively paralyzing it and the monitoring systems it controlled. During the ensuing confusion, Alistair Finch, the man of the hour, simply walked out of a service exit and into a waiting transport piloted by a nervous but determined Kenna O'Connell. They raced to the spaceport and boarded the Kepler's Eye. As they blasted into orbit, they knew the Deep Space Authority would soon discover what had happened. They were now fugitives, chasing a ghost at the edge of the solar system, with the full weight of the authorities not far behind. The journey to the Kuiper belt was a tense, exhilarating blur of shared data and frantic preparation. For the first time, Alistair had a collaborator, someone whose intellect matched his own, someone who looked at his impossible data with wonder, not pity. They refined Kenna's initial findings, confirming the acknowledgement signal had come from a single, specific set of coordinates in a dark, empty sector of the belt. We're approaching the coordinates. All sensors are showing nothing. Just ice, rock, and the void. Are you sure about this, Alistair? It's not there for our sensors to see, Kenna. It's waiting for a specific key. He opened a channel. This is Dr. Alistair Finch of the research vessel Kepler's Eye. Broadcasting the reply sequence now. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the space before them shimmered. The scattered ice and dust in a patch of empty void seemed to move, to part, revealing an object that had been hidden from sight. It was not another probe. It was a perfect, crystalline octahedron, the size of their ship, floating in perfect, impossible stillness. Its facets were dark, but as their reply signal washed over it, they began to glow with a soft, internal, blue light. It had been waiting. As the artifact came to life, it opened a stable, two-way communication channel. The new message was not a test. It was a greeting. A flood of pure, elegant information poured into the Kepler's eyes computers. My God! Alistair, it's a star chart. But not of our galaxy. It's a map of the entire local galactic cluster. And it's a welcome packet. An invitation. The message resolved into a final, simple concept, a universal truth expressed in pure mathematics. The callers, as Alistair now thought of them, were an ancient, non-corporeal species, architects of the cosmos. Their probes were not just tests, they were seeds, designed to find intelligent life that had mastered quantum communication. They were an invitation to join a galactic community, a network of civilizations who had passed the test and were ready to talk. Their moment of transcendent discovery was broken. A vessel had just dropped out of FTL behind them. It was a DSA patrol cutter, the Vigilance, its weapons ports already glowing. Kepler's eye, you are in violation of DSA quarantine and are harboring a fugitive. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded. That unknown object is to be considered hostile. The DSA ship fired a warning shot, a blast of plasma that sizzled past their viewport. They were out of time. Alistair and Kenna looked at each other. They had come this far. They could not let humanity's first true conversation with the universe end in a hail of panicked, ignorant weapons fire. We have to show them. Not just our data. The source. With a single, shared thought, they acted. They used their ship's comms array to do something simple, something no human could fake. They took a tiny, harmless fragment of the alien data they were receiving, a perfect, rotating, 3D model of the DNA of a silicon-based life form from a world a million light-years away, and they broadcast it directly to the Vigilance. On the bridge of the Vigilance, the captain and his crew stared in stunned silence at the impossible, beautiful, and utterly undeniable proof on their screen. It was not a weapon. It was not a threat. It was knowledge. It was wonder. It was contact. The captain slowly, deliberately, lowered his hand from the weapons console. His mission to capture a madman had just become a mission to witness the dawn of a new age. The final scene shows the two human ships, the small research vessel and the military cutter, floating side by side in silent awe before the glowing, crystalline artifact. The artifact continues its gentle, silent broadcast, a conversation that will take humanity centuries to fully understand. Alistair Finch, the man who was once a prisoner of time and a pariah to his own people, now stood as its first, true ambassador. And Kenna O'Connell, the brilliant academic who believed in a single, impossible data point, was the co-discoverer of a new era. Their personal struggles were over. But humanity's great, new, and wonderful journey into the galactic community had only just begun. They had come this far. They could not let humanity's first true conversation with the universe end in a hail of panicked, ignorant weapons fire. We have to show them. Not just our data. The source. With a single, shared thought, they acted. They used their ship's comms array to do something simple, something no human could fake. They took a tiny, harmless fragment of the alien data they were receiving, a perfect, rotating, 3D model of the DNA of a silicon-based life form from a world a million light-years away, and they broadcast it directly to the Vigilance. On the bridge of the Vigilance, the captain and his crew stared in stunned silence at the impossible, beautiful, and utterly undeniable proof on their screen. It was not a weapon. It was not a threat. It was knowledge. It was wonder. It was contact. The captain slowly, deliberately, lowered his hand from the weapon's console. His mission to capture a madman had just become a mission to witness the dawn of a new age. The final scene shows the two human ships, the small research vessel and the military cutter, floating side by side in silent awe before the glowing, crystalline artifact. The artifact continues its gentle, silent broadcast, a conversation that will take humanity centuries to fully understand. Alistair Finch, the man who was once a prisoner of time and a pariah to his own people, now stood as its first, true ambassador. And Kenna O'Connell, the brilliant academic who believed in a single, impossible data point, was the co-discoverer of a new era. Their personal struggles were over. But humanity's great, new, and wonderful journey into the galactic community had only just begun.